Today, Forum TV has the pleasure of speaking with James Bezan, Member of Parliament for Selkirk, Interlake, Eastman, and Conservative Shadow Minister for National Defence. James is known to be a staunch advocate of Ukraine and also one of the loudest voices on Canada's defence policy, national security, and foreign affairs. James, thank you so much for finding time to sit down with us.
Thanks for taking the time to meet with me.
James, let's start off with your analysis of the current dynamic of Canada-Ukraine relations. Do you think that Canadian government is doing enough to support Ukraine in the face of continuous Russian aggression and the violations that the Russians continue to make every single day?
So we have been supportive of the efforts that the government has made in providing support to Ukraine. We always believe that there's more that can be done, especially as we are retiring some of the military equipment that we have. We always have believed that it's better to send it to Ukraine than put it in the scrap heap. And in a lot of cases, you're paying people to actually decommission these vehicles, rockets, and other weapons. Case in point is the government was trying to decommission the CRV-7 rockets. We had over 80,000 of them sitting in storage. We used to have them on our CF-18s. We've been putting pressure on the government for quite some time on it, and it was after they finally did an assessment. They were trying to say, well, they're not safe to use, they weren't stored properly. Well, guess what? Almost every rocket was still functional, and slowly they have been sending them to Ukraine. That saves lives in Ukraine. It provides them with the defense capability that they need and the ability to advance their forces against the Russian invaders. So, you know, it's those types of situations where we know that instead of spending tens of millions of dollars in decommissioning these rockets, or, you know, hundreds of millions of dollars in decommissioning our armored vehicles like our LAV-2s and 3s that are currently being scrapped, why aren't we just taking the ones that still work, send them to Ukraine, make sure that you know, they have spare parts from the other LAVs that aren't maybe usable, and at the end of the day, they are protecting Ukrainian soldiers and able to stand up against the Russian invaders and the barbarians that have come across illegally into Ukraine from Russia.
Let's talk about the other aspect of this war. As you know, the Russians are actively attacking Ukrainian energy infrastructure currently. They're trying to cause blackouts across the entire country. Conservatives have been calling for the substitution of Russian gas and other fossil fuels with Canadian energy. Does it seem to you that the Canadian government is currently on board with that? What would you do differently than the approach that's currently being taken? And as a follow-up, I want to ask about the opposition that we're seeing from the provinces, some provincial leaders who do not want pipelines crossing their territory. How would you overcome that challenge?
Well, Anton, you know that Pierre Poilievre has been a huge proponent of using Canadian energy, whether it's natural gas or oil, to displace Russian energy. We've had Germany, we've had Ukraine, we've had Japan and other nations coming to us saying, we need your LNG, we need your oil, please get it to market so we don't have to buy from Russia. And we want to make sure that there is energy security in Europe, especially, so they don't have to continue to buy just because it's wintertime. They need to heat their homes and drive their cars. We don't want them having to be reliant on oil coming from Russia or natural gas coming from Russia and fund Putin's war machine. That is the driving factor in why this war has continued on for so long. The United States has asked us to put more energy into the international market, and of course, we've been saying it, Pierre has been the most vocal on it, and all we've gotten from the Carney Liberals is empty rhetoric. You know, they announced their major projects office and the first round of projects that they're going to fund and drive forward and expediting, but, you know, all those projects were already on the books and already approved. And there wasn't a single pipeline in it. So we have to get pipelines built in this country. We have to get LNG especially and oil to Eastern Canada in the pipe and at the port so that we can load the ships and get it to Europe so they can help Ukraine especially, but also defund Putin and the war machine.
James, you have recently introduced a private member's bill in the House of Commons, Bill C-219, the Sergei Magnitsky International Anti-Corruption and Human Rights Act. Can you tell us more about it?
Yeah, it's a bill that we've been thinking about for some time. As you know, I brought forward the Sergei Magnitsky law in 2018. The government has only used it once and listed a pile of people on that piece of legislation, but they've never reused it. And part of that reason is that they want to always go to the Special Economic Measures Act. But there was major shortfalls in that piece of legislation, and times have changed as well. So I want to make sure that we are updating both those bills and go to what we'd call the Global Magnitsky Sanctions Act, and that every time that we are sanctioning corrupt foreign officials, people that are gross human right violators, and those that are committing the atrocities that we're witnessing in Ukraine and elsewhere, that they're held to account. So this bill will start that process of updating that legislation, and for the first time, also put in the definition of what is transnational repression to ensure that those who are politically interfering here in Canada, that they are coercing and essentially going out and forcing people that are of different ethnicities, but Chinese nationals, Russian nationals, Iranian nationals who are now here in Canada as either permanent residents or as students or as Canadian citizens are, of course, being bullied by a lot of these agents of those corrupt governments. So let's make sure that we can also sanction those individuals and force them out of Canada who are using their positions, often in embassies, consulates, and economic trade offices, to actually go out there and actually coerce and repress those individuals who just came to Canada to get away from all that.
James, is there currently a mechanism where representatives of diaspora communities in Canada can report some of this suspicious activity? And if not, will your act change that?
So right now, other than being invited to committee occasionally, maybe, or lobbying individual members of parliament, as we often receive delegations from different diaspora communities, whether it's the Persian community, the Chinese community, the Belarusian community, the Ukrainian community, of course, and others come here and say, okay, we got these individuals that have committed certain violations of human rights. I often hold up as an example the Falun Gong community here in Canada, and we know that the Communist Chinese Party have been legally harvesting organs from Falun Gong practitioners in China. So we want to make sure that we provide an opportunity for them to appear before Parliament. And so we're making it so either the Senate or the House of Commons Foreign Affairs Committees or elsewhere for that matter can hear from delegations to make strong recommendations of why certain individuals deserve to be sanctioned by Canada and held accountable for their human rights violations or their gross or as being corrupt foreign officials. And ultimately, the parliamentary committees will have to report that to the House, and the Act requires that the Minister of Foreign Affairs acts upon it. So they have to report back why they are or are not adding those people to the list. In the preamble of the bill, it also talks about supporting the International Anti-Corruption Court at The Hague, which is right now still in the process of getting set up. But if you look at history, everybody that becomes, a despot or a dictatorial leader and becomes someone that commits genocide and huge atrocities against their own people, they always start off as a corrupt official. And so let's make sure that we are getting them early and holding them to account for their corruption, and maybe we can reduce the number of atrocities that we're witnessing around the world even today.
I read the act itself, and I believe that you're also trying to go after the immediate family of those individuals that are sanctioned by Canada. What message are you trying to send with that?
We hear of it all the time, that individuals that have already been named under Canada's sanction regime, often their spouses and or children find their way here to Canada with big bank accounts, and essentially, the very people that you're trying to ensure aren't using Canada as a safe haven for hiding their family and their wealth, shouldn't be allowed to do that. And so it's important that those that are being sanctioned, that it's also extended to their immediate family. There is the ability for anyone in the immediate family to make the argument back as why they shouldn't be on the list. So, there is fair process in this, but ultimately we don't want to be abused. Take advantage of our financial system, take advantage of a relatively safe society that we live in, and have people say, okay, I'm getting sanctioned, I'm not going to be able to do much. Why don't you guys go move to Canada? And, we're coming over here as students. We can't let that happen. And so this is important to ensure that those that are trying to escape and at least have their family enjoy the profits of their illicit activities, that they aren't doing it here in Canada.
How would you assess the current level of support for your act in the House of Commons? And for those people that are watching us and do support what you're trying to achieve, how can they support this effort to make sure that this act becomes a law?
So I've been having conversations with all parties, and Conservatives are definitely on side. Looks like I'm going to get support from the Bloc and the NDP on it as well. I'm hoping for cross-aisle support from the governing Liberals, but I would encourage everyone out there that's watching to contact their members of Parliament, from all parties for that matter, and ask them to support Bill C-219 so that we can move forward on modernizing our sanctions regime and strengthening them so that we can ensure that we are holding to account those who are abusing their own citizens, and on top of that, have often gotten very rich by doing it.
Any final thoughts on the war in Ukraine and any message that you would like to send to the community at this point in time? We're approaching winter. It's going to be a very difficult winter once again. So what would you say to people who constantly worry about what's happening in Ukraine because of the family ties?
I'm sure, like everybody that's watching, Ukraine is always in our thoughts and prayers. We watch it very closely in what's happening. Encouraged when we're seeing wins on the battlefield. We're seeing right now there's some major advances made just in the last few days, and we're praying for victory. We want to make sure that we continue to provide that help. So everyone in Canada that has been providing donations to the various organizations that are getting supplies, material, and support to Ukraine, thank you so much. Continue to do it. I know that we have to continue to dig deep in our own personal pockets to support those organizations that are making a difference. I'd just say to those in Ukraine, thank you, for fighting for freedom, fighting for democracy, fighting for Ukraine's liberty, and defending the West from the Russian war machine that Putin has been pushing through despite numerous losses and huge cost, and is undermining Russia's own viability, but we continue to encourage Ukraine so that they can be victorious.
Our guest today was Member of Parliament James Bezan. James, thank you very much for your time and for sharing your views and your opinions with us.
Thanks, Anton. Anytime.